Unarmed combat, and in particular, grappling, got a big overhaul in the 2024 rules. Subscriber Unforgiven Pretender had some questions, and in attempting to answer them, I'm going to go through and list every rule that I found that was relevant in this copy of the Player's Handbook, which was graciously loaned to me by subscriber Twin Steel, who in return simply asked that I check out a number of other underrated D&D YouTubers and consider giving a shout out to those that I found interesting. Today, I'm delighted to highlight Miles from Miles Away Games, whose relaxing voice and mannerism just sort of sucked me into his videos, and I'll link my favorite of his videos at the end of this, but for now, let's dive into the rules. In order to talk about grappling in 2024, we really have to talk about the elephant in the room of unarmed strikes, because unarmed strikes saw such a huge overhaul and change in how they work compared to regular 5th edition, because they had the shove action and the grapple action basically sandwiched into unarmed strikes themselves. And that has a lot of little side benefits and side effects, but it also means that in order to understand one, we have to kind of understand the other. So I'll start by explaining unarmed strikes, and then we'll move from there. An unarmed strike now is classified as a melee attack that involves you using your body to damage, grapple, or shove a target within 5 feet of you. Whenever you use it, you choose one of the following options. Damage, like in standard 5th edition, which does 1 point of damage plus your strength modifier, unless you have something that modifies it, like being a monk or having the unarmed fighting style. Or grapple, which means that a target gets a strength or dexterity saving throw, it chooses which, or else it gains the Grappled Condition. The DC for the saving throw and any escape attempts is 8 plus your strength modifier plus your proficiency bonus. This grapple is possible only if the target is no more than one size larger than you and if you have a hand free to grab it. And finally, you can also shove. The target must succeed on a strength or dexterity saving throw, it chooses which, or you either push it 5 feet away or cause it to have the prone condition. The DC, again, 8, strength mod, proficiency. Only possible again if it is no more than one size category larger than you, so sorry, you're not going to grab the ankle of a hill giant and make it go tumbling down. One of the small detriments to the change in these rules here is that it does allow either a strength or a dexterity saving throw, meaning most monsters are going to have one decent option that they're going to be able to use, so landing a grapple is not going to be the easiest thing in the world. But as we'll be able to see from the influence that it has upon people and the options you have to build around it, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because it's going to be fairly impactful to land that grapple. Because now the Grappled Condition not only reduces somebody's speed down to 0, but it also gives disadvantage on attack rolls against any target other than the Grappler, meaning that it's a tanking option to control the direction of your prey's attacks. If you have a hold of somebody, they can't beat up your friends nearly as well, meaning that the barbarian and the big burly fighter is going to be loving the ability to control the focus of the battle, which is something that was severely lacking in the base rule set for those kinds of tank classes. Similarly, you're still able to move people when you're grappling, which is part of the condition. You become movable to where the grappler can drag or carry you when it moves, but every foot of movement costs it 1 extra foot unless you are tiny or 2 or more sizes smaller than it, meaning that the extra foot per foot of movement that you're getting means that it stacks with difficult terrain. So if you're moving through difficult terrain, every foot is going to cost you 3 feet of movement in order to move forward. So it'll slow you down significantly, unless, of course, you address that later in a different set of rules, which we'll come to soon. The grappling rules are found in the rules glossary right alongside the condition on page 367 of the new Player's Handbook, and they read like this. Successfully grappling a creature gives it the grapple condition. Go figure. A creature must have a hand free to grapple another creature. Some stat blocks and game effects allow a creature to grapple using a tentacle, a maw, or another body part. Whatever part they're using, they can only grapple one creature at a time with that part, and the grappler can't use that part to target another creature until it ends the grapple, which closes any kinds of loopholes that might have existed around having one hand free and being able to grapple 5 or 6 people by just picking them up one after the other. None of that nonsense going on here. One hand, one person. Simple. Escaping a grapple is, as it was previously, either a strength, athletics, or dexterity acrobatics check as an action that is opposed by the saving throw DC that we discussed earlier. The condition also ends if the grappler is ever incapacitated, meaning that if they are receiving the incapacitated condition or one of the conditions like stunned or paralyzed that has incapacitated as a rider. And it also goes down if you ever leave the reach of your grappler. So if you teleport out of reach or are moved out by somebody else's force movement, then you can escape the grappler in that way, realizing that with a speed of 0, all of your other kinds of movement are not possible. And basically that's the rules for grappling and unarmed strikes in a nutshell. However, there are a number of other small rules changes that definitely impact what you can and cannot do as a grappler nowadays. For instance, on page 371, we have the new entry on opportunity attacks. You can make an opportunity attack when a creature that you can see leaves your reach using its action, its bonus action, its reaction, or one of its speeds. To make the opportunity attack, take a reaction to make one melee attack with a weapon or an unarmed strike against the provoking creature. The attack occurs right before the creature leaves your reach. Because you can make an unarmed strike with an opportunity attack, which was always an option, you can now grapple somebody who's trying to escape your reach, which was not previously an option available as part of an opportunity attack, because the rules as they were previously written told us that you had to make an attack action on your turn in order to attempt the grapple. This is a big boon again for anybody who's looking to build a physical character that can tank an opponent by holding them close and keeping them from escaping, as now that opportunity attack doesn't just have to hit them and deal damage, or you have to have the sentinel feat in order to reduce their speed. All you have to do is sacrifice the opportunity to make an attack roll against them and instead force a saving throw to potentially grab hold of them and stop them from getting away. But wait, of course, there's more. There's several feats in the general feats and in the origin and fighting styles that allow us to change how grappling works for our specific characters. In the origin feats, there's the Tavern Brawler option, which enhances your unarmed strike so that when you hit, you can deal 1d4 damage plus your strength modifier instead of the normal damage. You can re-roll any ones with unarmed strikes regardless of what the dice is that you're using to dish it out. Gives you proficiency in improvised weapons, which is relatively unrelated, and when you hit a creature with an unarmed strike as part of the attack action on your turn, you can deal damage to the target and also push it 5 feet away from you, so you get a little bit of a shove on top of your punches. This doesn't necessarily directly affect grapple, but it certainly influences your unarmed strikes and is probably best in class in terms of feats for a monk who now gets to re-roll any natural ones and get a free push while they're pummeling you round after round. More directly related to grappling, of course, is the Grappler feat, which was considered one of the worst, pretty much, in the 5th edition rules, but has been significantly upgraded. Now it gives you a strength or dexterity score increase by 1, and whenever you hit somebody with an unarmed strike as part of the attack action on your turn, you can use both the damage and the grapple option together. Though you can only use this benefit once per turn, it means that you hit them, deal damage, and they have to make a saving throw or end up grappled. Once you have somebody grappled, the Grappler feat gives you advantage on attack rolls against a creature that you have grappled, which is great, again, for monks to increase their damage that they're dealing, or for anybody who's trying to grab a hold of them, as they've got disadvantage on attacks against anybody but you, and you've got advantage on your attacks to pummel them. And yet still there's more, as the Fast Wrestler allows you to avoid the speed reduction when you move a grappled creature. Admittedly, there's a little bit of a typo here, and then it says your speed isn't halved when you move a creature grappled by you if the creature's your size or smaller, when in actuality there is no such thing as your speed being halved. Instead, it's an additional 1 foot cost per movement, but I think we can all figure out that that's what they actually meant. Of course, there's still one other feat that's applicable, and this is the fighting style feat for unarmed fighting. While this will usually be taken as a class feature for, say, fighters or rangers, it is available as a feat option for anybody else if you happen to be building some kind of niche build that sits around it. It's pretty much been ported straight from Tosh's in that it gives you a d6 on your damage dice. Unless you have both hands free, then you get to do a d8, and at the start of each of your turns, you deal 1d4 bludgeoning damage to one creature that you're grappling, which is a pretty lackluster bonus. It doesn't really change anything in terms of how the rules are going to impact any of your stuff, but it does add that tiny little bit of extra damage. But it is a way that you can build a character other than a monk that is focused on pummeling people with their fists without being stuck with, say, the d4 from Tavern Brawler. The last kind of notable change to unarmed fighting and grappling in general is the changes that were made to monks, and it's a big one because you might be thinking, oh, monks are best in class in this, but hey, they would need strength in order to be able to set a decent DC for their grappling. Well, that's not true anymore because the new monks have a dexterous attacks ability as part of their martial arts feature that allows them to use their dexterity modifier instead of strength modifier for the attack and damage rolls of your unarmed strikes or monk weapons, just the same as they used to. In addition, when you use the grapple or shove option of your unarmed strike, you can use your dexterity modifier instead of your strength modifier to determine the save DC. In other words, everything that they do is based on their dexterity instead of on strength, so you can set a nice high DC while still focusing your dexterity for that class. Also, they can always make an unarmed strike as a bonus action without regard to what they're doing with their main action or whether they do an attack action before or after, so it gives them the chance to grapple somebody and then use that to get movement, etc., put them where they want them, and then figure out what they're going to do with their action a little bit later on that. And, of course, monks deal more damage with their unarmed strikes, starting with a d6 and slowly working their way up to a d12 so that they can be really pummeling at home. And as mentioned, with Tavern Brawler, they can reroll their natural ones to increase their damage output even more. So with all that in mind, the basic questions that we're trying to answer is what can you and can't you do while grappling? So you can stop somebody from moving. You can drag them around the battlefield and move them into hazards. You can knock them prone and keep them prone by grappling them and reducing their speed to 0. You can grapple now on an opportunity attack, which you couldn't do before, and you can give disadvantage on their attacks against other people in order to provide a tanking sort of situation. However, there are still a bunch of weird things that players love to ask if they can do because their mental image of what grappling is doesn't necessarily match up too well to the rules. For instance, I know that I have been asked repeatedly, can I throw somebody because they're smaller than me and I'm grappling them? Can I immobilize them so that they can't swing their sword arm, or can I silence them so that they can't cast spells? And the answer to all of those options is no. By rules as written, you can't do any of those things. Your players can only do the things that are listed in the raw. That said, as a public service announcement, you can, of course, improvise this sometimes, or you could even house rule it to allow it at your table on a regular basis. But without a resource limitation, it is more potent than spells that would allow you to do the same thing. And so you do need to be careful about how much of that you allow. My experience has been that allowing people to throw people is not tremendously impactful, but allowing them to immobilize somebody to the point where they can't use a specific action if they don't have other options means that all tension has just been drug out of the situation, and it tends to kill the fun of the fight, even if it does make that one player super excited for that brief moment. Similarly, silencing a wizard has the same sort of effect. You can, however, move towards giving them the option to double down in order to gain something like restrained condition, which will just impact their actions, or you could work in some kind of house rule to be able to daze them or the like, so that, again, action economy is affected, but you don't ever ever want to take away it entirely as a resourceless cost. And there are, of course, subclasses that are out there that will probably allow you to get some of these things anyway, so you can point specific players towards those, like the Path of the Giant from Big B's that allows you to throw your enemies or allies around as part of your grappling influence as a barbarian. The other question that was asked was whether or not you can reposition a creature as long as it stays within your reach, or whether or not you can only drag them behind you. And the rules are not clear in that one. So the answer on that one, unfortunately, is you're going to have to ask your DM. Me personally, when I run grapples in 5th edition, I've always allowed people to move their opponent around them at the same cost in movement that it would take for the player to move around that situation. So for every 5 feet that you move somebody, it's going to cost you 10 feet of your movement rate in order to wrestle them around towards the danger if you don't want to move into that danger first. And that's been a pretty balanced and simple way of handling that for me and mine, but you're going to have to talk to your DM or decide for yourself for your table what kind of rules you're going to use to allow that. Because for right now, all it says is that you can move them with you, which is not very definitive in terms of what that's going to actually look like. If you've got any other grappling questions, I'd be delighted to answer them down in the comments. My goal is to hit 10,000 subs by the end of this year, so if this has been useful to you in any way, then please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing with others. Every little bit helps. Thank you for letting this video grab your attention all the way to the end. You're amazing. Don't forget to check out this video from Miles Away Games about how to make Ranger players using the 2014 rules happy by introducing a few elements that they can work on. As always, thanks for watching. Happy adventure.